was so excited when I finished my book. I was like, okay, I'm 60. My book's done. I can just rest on my laurels. I can just relax and I'll be doggone. It's like, no, you can't, because now, right now, I need you to do this part. I'm like, it's exhausting, but it's also, I just have this, like, when I slide into home, right? The last day I take a breath in this body, I want to know that I used me completely up, right? I have this, like, picture of, like, we get this trunk of gifts and talents and things when we come to this earth, and when I go back and we open that trunk, I want that baby to be empty. I want it to be completely empty. Right? And so, but it means I have to keep stretching myself, and stretching myself is exhausting. I'm
Well,
so
there
tired of the discomfort.
there is a time for rest. Don't forget that.
But I'm talking about
Yes.
internal stretching of,
Yeah.
like,
Right. Right.
going into the uncomfortable, right? To become the person that we know that we were born to be.
Welcome, everyone, to the Spiritual Forum. I'm so glad you're here. And I'm recording the week of Thanksgiving, but in Wisconsin, it is starting to get a little cool, thus the sweater, but it's a beautiful time of year. And I'm excited to introduce you to my guest. But first, I just want to remind you to rate and review the podcast, join the YouTube channel, engage on YouTube, and join my newsletter list at thespiritualforum.org. You can also donate there if you feel so moved, and I just really appreciate all my donors. Now, let me introduce you to my guest, Cheri Neal. She's actually somebody who used to be in my spiritual community in Deerfield, Illinois, and I'm so excited to introduce her to you. She's always been a trailblazer. She was the first woman to drive a snowplow for the state of Illinois, first woman to join the Zion Benton Kiwanis Club, and the first woman elected as township supervisor of Zion, Illinois. So this is a government servant, somebody who's in public service. This is the first time I've had anybody in public service on my podcast. Yeah, I know. Having served in full-time elected office since 2001, Cheri champions community engagement and is recognized for her visioning and collaborations. She's a certified life coach, public speaker, and published author, all to help people soar personally and professionally. Her most recent book is Messages of the Monarch: How to Find Your Wings and Fly.
Mhm.
And in this book, she juxtaposes her experience of raising monarch butterflies with her personal stories of turning adversity into opportunity. So, as I mentioned, Cheri was part of my spiritual community, and I'm just delighted to have you, Cheri. Welcome.
It is
Welcome.
such a delight to be here with you, and an honor. Listening to, like, the other guests that you've had on, it's like, yeah, that you would invite me on. I was very, very, very flattered. So thank you.
Well, you sent me your book in the mail, and this podcast, I'm reading books all the time, and so to be fully honest, I'm like, oh my gosh, another book. Like, I'll look at it. But you also quoted me in it, so I'm like, okay, now I'm intrigued. I don't think I've ever been quoted
Oh,
in a
good.
book. And then I thought, gosh, I just love the theme of this
Yeah.
book,
Oh,
and I'd love to have you on because it is unique to juxtapose our journey as spiritual beings
mhm.
on this earth plane with the same journey that a monarch butterfly goes through. And I want to hear your story, and I want to hear about how you started with raising monarch butterflies, and then we'll kind of get into the guts of. I mean, 'cause to me, your story is basically about the spiritual life,
Mhm.
and so you before we get into your anything else, what do you think your message is?
I'm curious what you think my message is, and then I'll share you what I believe my message
Okay,
is. Yeah, what comes to mind for you?
okay. Well, I think your message is definitely about transformation and empowerment. And you are a person who really likes to serve and help people with that whole process. Now, the monarch butterfly, we'll talk about that later, but to move from a caterpillar to a butterfly is a transformative process. And all of us, if we're awake to our true nature, that's our process. And so to me, I think your message is all about what is possible for you in finding your purpose.
I love that. That's what you captured, because it makes me crazy inside, right? That we are like this world full of caterpillars, not recognizing that we have the capacity to transform. We just have to believe it, right? And so I'm constantly just trying to get people to connect with like, what do you enjoy? What do you want? What would bring you joy to help you transform and get out of being stuck, right? So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the thing is I think it's a matter of comfort.
mm,
Like if I'm a caterpillar, I know what that
yeah,
is. I know how to predict my days. I know how to eat. I know how to, survive. And that whole scary, magical thing that happens in the chrysalis,
mm,
I think most people don't want to go there because that's that. I don't know if you remember, but back when I led church, I used to talk about the crucifixion and
mhm,
resurrection, and in the middle was that
yeah,
tomb time. And that tomb
mm,
time is that mysterious transformation time. But, who knows what happens there? And I think that's why most of us stay
yeah.
on the side of the caterpillar.
I think it's even just releasing the layers. Yeah, I mean, because
Okay.
you have to release 4 layers before you get to the chrysalis. And as a society, we're so busy putting on layers, right? Whether it's degrees and titles
Right.
and,
Yeah.
biases and weight and, I mean, we just keep coding ourselves to try and protect ourselves, and it ends up keeping us from ever getting, uh, into the discomfort, right? To be willing to find our wings.
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. I forgot. I jumped right from caterpillar to
Right?
chrysalis, and there's a whole
A
process
huge
there.
process.
And so, can you first of all tell us about how you got involved with
Yeah.
raising
Yeah.
butterflies, and then why did you walk through the process, and then maybe we'll address some of the great stories in your life that align with that same process that I think people could really be inspired
Yeah.
by. So first, how did you get with the whole butterfly
So
thing?
it was crazy because I was in the middle of going through a divorce and I was so depressed, right? I grew up Catholic. And so it's, the cardinal sin. I had 2 kids. They were 5 and 11 at the time. And yeah, I'd get out of my car coming home. And it was funny. You mentioned I was the first girl to drive a snowplow. But I'd get out of my car and my grass was growing and I didn't know how to run my lawnmower even. Right. And so just this like, how am I going to manage with 2 kids being a single mom? And one day I get the mail and I'm flipping through it, and the community colleges always have these mini courses. And I see this ad for a class on how to raise monarch butterflies. I'm like, okay, yeah, I wasn't a butterfly person. I wasn't a bug person, but I kept like, well, this is my little butterfly, right? What was it even? So I signed up for the class. And so I go to this class and I remember they're talking about how one of the things you have to do is cut the milkweed and you have to put it in a rose vase, the little flower sticks, right? And like, I'm so discombobulated. I'm like I'm like, how do you fit this in here? How do you fit? And they're like, no, you slide the stem. I'm like, I knew that. I knew
Oh,
that, but I would
oh,
just
yeah.
like, and so I came home that day and I went out and I found a couple of eggs and a caterpillar, and I spent the entire summer just sitting, watching like this whole process. All they do is like eat and sleep and poop a lot, right? And the bigger they get, the more they poop. But that's all they did, and like they just trust the process and they release these layers and right, they hang upside down and they let go. And one day I was sitting there with the looking at the egg, right, and the egg is literally the tip of a pencil. I mean, that's how tiny it is. And monarch butterflies fly up like 2,800 miles to Mexico for the migration. And I was just like overwhelmed with like emotion of like, God, like if you put that in that teeny tiny little speck of an egg, you had to have put something in me. You had to have, right? And
Mm.
just show me, right? Just show me. And a dear friend of mine taught me the prayer, Lord, lead me where you need me and speak to me in words that I cannot possibly misunderstand. And
Mm.
so I just started trusting, literally just started trusting. And my last day of plowing snow for IDOT, we got laid off on April 15th. And a guy that I used to just stop and get coffee at his used car lot calls me, and he had heard that I was going through divorce, and I had a Jeep Wrangler at the time. And he calls and says, I need you to come here. I was like, for what? He was like, because I'm going to give you a car. I was like, for what? And he was like, I want you and your kids to go on the road for 2 weeks and just get out of here and just rebalance. And so like having like that chance with them and just like the whole time of reacclimating from my divorce into being a single mom. And I've always said that like I'll either teach my kids how to be in a good marriage or how to be good single, but I'm not going to teach them anything else. And so yeah, so I just kept raising monarch butterflies. I've raised
I think just, Cheri, I have to say, raising monarch butterflies is not what most people coming out of a divorce would do, especially if they're overwhelmed with cutting the grass. It's like, okay, like I'm overwhelmed with the grass because I don't know how to do that. Oh, look, I'll go raise monarch butterflies. To me, that's so interesting. To me, that was like the first step of trusting the process.
interest.
I mean, it's like God showed up in some way in that educational bulletin, and you're like, this is for me.
Yeah.
You know, because I think most people would probably toss the brochure out or whatever it is because you're overwhelmed with the grass. But for some reason, you were attracted to this, and you took that first step.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it is so interesting just looking back in hindsight, right? When I
Yeah.
look back at it, I think about like how much my kids hated monarch butterflies, right? Because I was so obsessed with them. And, we'd be driving down the road and I'd see milkweed on the side of the road. So I'd have to stop because the lawnmowers would, chew them up. And my kids just hate, right? So
Oh.
it's kind of fun from like this perspective to go, yeah, that was interesting. I truly felt like I was drawn by them to like teach me something. And it's really emotional for me because my book, it was such a long journey to write it. And the first time I had a mentor that was determined that I should write it on like business practices, right? So what are the things that Monarch teaches about, and I wrote like 7 chapters and one night I just threw it away. I was like, I'm actually like, what's the word where you take advantage of somebody, right? Exploit.
Oh,
I
yeah,
felt like I
yeah.
was exploiting the
Yeah.
monarch butterfly. I was like, that's not what they came to teach me. I'm not going to use them for some
Oh,
other
yeah.
message. And so I pitched it and then I started writing it in another, trying to like make it something. And then I pitched that and then I just started writing and it took 3 tries. I literally had 3 different manuscripts sitting in front of me and I hated them. I mean, I hated them. And so I hiked the Camino, or I did hike the Camino, but I hiked the Grand Canyon last year. And when I was it's called Rim to Him, and you hike it in one day. And as I was hiking, I was like, all right, gigs up. Whatever I'm going to do with this, I've got to be willing to just let it go. And so I reached out to a dear friend, Mary Helen Conroy, who's in Madison. She's a retired librarian who became a publishing coach. And I asked her if she would help me. And she said, so I need you to do me a favor. I said, what's that? She was like, I want you to take all 3 copies and I want you to read the introduction and chapter 1. And I need you to come up with like one, that you would like. And I was like, okay. And she was like, and in the meantime, I need you to send me like the last copy that you did. I was like, okay. So I did that. So I was like, wait, how much time do I have? She was like, 3 weeks. I'm like, oh. She's like, Cheri, you can do this. I'm like, I don't even want to touch it. She was like, I know, but you can do it. And so like 3 days after she gets my book, she calls me and she says, why isn't this published? And I was like, because I don't like it. She's like, whatever's blocking you, this baby's getting published. So I set my 60th birthday as the date that I wanted to publish her. And
Oh, wow.
so I went and I have a favorite chair in our Starbucks in a corner, and that became my office. And every evening I would go there, and it was funny. I met with her 3 weeks later, and well, so before that, the other thing that she said was, so I looked through your book, and you mentioned the word Camino de Santiago one time. I was like, yeah. She was like, we need a chapter. That was a really significant time in your life when
Yeah.
I walked. I took a sabbatical
Yeah.
from work and walked across Spain. And so she encouraged me. So I got to go back and capture that. And then, but by the time I met her 3 weeks later, I had written 12 chapters, and my book only had like 9 chapters before that. And so she helped me, and something lit me on fire. And it was like, it's just time, right? That the chrysalis phase.
Yeah, it's time to
Yeah,
birth.
it was just time to go. And she was so fabulous with helping me all along the way of not getting stuck anymore. But one of the things she said, because I would always have people read parts of it and then they would critique it. And my spirit is not good at that. She was like, okay, I am the only person that gets to read this book right now. The only
Completely
one.
agree.
You know,
Yeah, completely
so
agree.
that was huge. And she was like, and I
Yeah.
promise you, I do not publish junk. So you don't have to worry about like doing that.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the layers. Uh, so the caterpillar starts off a caterpillar, and here she's just kind of cruising. So, what is the release of layers that the caterpillar does, and how does that relate to our life? And I assume some of what that process you just
Yeah.
described was
Yeah.
releasing
But
layers.
there's so much to it, right? I mean, there's so many things that like keep us bound, right? Where we can't get to our wings. Like the biggest one is unforgiveness. We are
Uh huh.
so critical of each other and this internal judge. I studied and I'm a coach with positive intelligence, and this judge that like it's constantly judging me, it's constantly judging you, it's constantly judging the world around us, and then we have these other saboteurs that are like always good cop, bad cop, just completely keeping us from paying attention to what matters, right? Staying in our soul. So I'm really grateful. I grew up in 12-step recovery and learning how to do that inventory, right? Writing out what I resent and or who, people, places, and things that I resent, and taking a closer look at it. There's a line in the book that I ascribe to, and it says, invariably we step on other people's toes and they retaliate, seemingly without provocation. Right. And so that has been magic for me, right? Because in every situation, anytime I'm in discord with anybody, right? If I can just figure out like what's something, and so, I'm in full time elected office, and one of the people that ran against me, for those of you, so you said this first time you've had somebody from public office on this, right?
Yes.
The people that are running for office are human beings with feelings and families, and the way that we have made it that I mean, I always picture like going in to apply for a job, right? And instead of like going in with like what I bring to offer, I've got a file because I found out who else you're interviewing, and I'm gonna make sure what a piece of crap they
Yeah.
are,
Yeah.
so that
Yeah.
they'll hire me. And it would never happen. We would never hire that person, and yet we elect people
All the
that
time.
do this to each other. And so I make it a point to not play that game. And one of the people that ran against me, they you have to get a FOIA, Freedom of Information Act. You turn it in, and within 5 days, I have to give you whatever information you want. They filed 1,500 pages. I mean, like constantly to try and destroy me. And for the life of me, I couldn't figure out what it was that I did to make them like be so targeted to try and destroy me. And they had a state's attorney's case against me. I mean, they were determined to take me down. And so after the election, the only thing I knew about these guys was that everybody said we had the same heart. So I'm like, this isn't okay. So I was like, all right, what could I have done to set this ball in motion? What could I have done? And the only thing I could think of was when she came up to tell me her husband was going to run against me, I might have been cocky, right? I just might have come off as arrogant. I don't
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
remember, but I was like, maybe that was it. And so I tried calling her a couple of times and she wouldn't return my calls. And so, how spirit works, I'm going in to get my hair cut. She's getting into her car and it's pouring rain out, right? So I just went and knocked on her window and I stood in the rain. I was like, can I get in and talk to you? So I got in the car with her and was able to ask, I apologized for coming off maybe arrogantly. And she was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I was like, really? And she said, do you want to know why I came at you the way I did? I was like, I would love to. And it was this whole personal thing that had to do with somebody else that had nothing to do with me. And I was like, oh my God. And thank God for my coaching, because my response was, anybody in your position might have felt that way. I didn't own anything. Somebody in your position might have felt that way. And I was like, here's all I know is everybody says we have the same heart. And I don't want to be friends with you. Don't get me wrong, but I want to be on the same team. She was like, "What do you mean, like sisters for the cause?" I'm like, "Exactly." She was like, "Seriously?" I was like, "Yeah." She was like, "Okay." And we hugged. And I went on my merry way. And when I was working, so I worked to make the zinnia the Zion flower, and she drove by one of the welcome to Zion signs and called me and said, "Just so you know, there's no zinnias under this sign." And so I called the person that was supposed to do it, and she was like, "I had to go out of town. The zinnias are probably all dead. I'm so sorry." So she scoured our county to find zinnias and planted them for me, right? And stayed a part of that project. And then shortly after that, I had been working literally for 12 years. This makes no sense to me, but I worked for 12 years to have one magazine that we send out in our community quarterly, where like the city, the park district, the library, the township, the schools, we all each have a page so that we're not all paying for postage to send out information. We're doing it together and then people can keep that for the quarter. 12 years. 12 years I worked on that. 3 tries. I was on the 3rd try. I was 1 page short. We couldn't do it because I was couldn't get somebody to pay for that last page. And her husband, the guy that ran against me, ended up being our sheriff, our Lake County sheriff. And I reached out to him and he did it. And so he saved that project. But had I not been willing to forgive and release those layers, right? I mean, there were 2 projects that couldn't have flown if I didn't take that step.
Well, yeah, the other interesting thing about that story is how you made an assumption about what was in her mind about you. And we
Mhm.
do that all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
We assume we know.
But the magic of that, what I love about that is it gives me a starting point, right? It just
Uh-huh.
because I couldn't think of anything
Well, yeah,
else,
they could be this.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
So what it did was it gave me something that I could apologize for, so it could
Okay.
open up the dialogue,
Okay.
and
Okay.
just to say out loud, what our mind does, I have to tell you, I have never been right. I mean, and I check it every single time. Like when my mind starts like going bonkers about stuff, I'll call the person and say, you know what, I'm really sorry if, and they're like, what are you talking about? Every single time. So yeah, my
Yes. Yes.
magnifying mind is ridiculous.
Yes, and we
So
do that a lot. We obsess over something we said or did or didn't say or didn't do, and
yeah,
that's why that person is this. And then we blow that
yeah,
whole story up in our mind, and then we tell people about it, and they help us blow it up. And
right. And all of that is just this drama, right? I mean, it's just this craziness. It's keeping us completely detracted from
yeah,
just living on purpose and living in joy.
yeah, and
It's
disconnected
amazing.
from everybody and
Yeah.
creating all these divisions. And we both, I think, would agree that the world's full of way too many divisions. And it's almost like as long as we focus on our divisions and our differences and keep at this and creating our drama, then we're not going to be about the business of fulfilling our own purpose. We're not
Yeah.
going to be about the business of creating a awesome world. We're going to
Yeah.
be distracted and stuck in the minutia and
Yeah.
all these layers that the caterpillar has. So does the
Mhm.
caterpillar actually have physical layers?
Mhm. They do.
And
They
so
they they they
it's like
outgrow their skin, and so their skin splits, and they actually eat their skin for protein,
that's
right? And so
interesting.
that's to
Yeah.
me, it's like, you know what I mean? As
It's
we
like
do this
integration. To
work,
me,
yes.
that it's a symbol of integration where
Yep,
you don't
that's
just leave it
exactly right.
behind. You actually bring it into you as part of who you are.
That's exactly right. It's so
Yeah.
powerful.
Yeah. So they go through 3 layers.
Mhm.
So it's kind of like
4
the
layers.
4 layers. Okay, so it's
Yep.
like a a a snake or a crab or, any of those that have to grow a
Mhm.
new exterior.
Mhm.
And so do they grow a new exterior? They just release one after another, and then they go into the chrysalis.
Yeah, as they grow, they release the next layer, right? And what's
Okay.
interesting is the last layer, so they climb up on something and they hook their feet into like this little pad that they spin, and then their skin splits and they just move back and forth like crazy and their skin goes up their body. And then, oh, I totally don't get this. They step out of their skin, so their little skin drops to the bottom of the cage, and now where their feet were is a stem. It's so
Is it
magical.
what? Is it
It's
what?
a stem. It's just like
A
a little
stem.
click.
Okay.
I'm like,
Interesting.
where'd their feet go? I mean, it's just it's
That's so
so
interesting. And,
yeah.
I think that when you think about all of creation, and it is magnificent. I mean, every creature has some unique purpose and unique abilities, and everyone is magical and divine. And then it's like you look at something like a caterpillar and the whole butterfly thing, it's like, wow, that is so incredible. Like, what was the divine thinking? And
Mm,
it's almost like the butterfly metaphor is used so much in spirituality. So
mhm,
it's like that caterpillar is there to show us our own process. And
mhm.
most of us aren't paying attention,
Right.
but she's there showing us exactly shed those layers and then go into the mystery.
Yeah, just trust it. Just
and
and
no
it
and
means
no
like not having a clue, right? I mean, just
right.
and what's
Yeah.
interesting is a couple of times that when it went into the chrysalis, the stem didn't stick to the roof and it dropped and there's nothing in there. It's just goo. I mean, literally just goo. But if you look at the outside, you can see the edging of their wings
Yeah.
within gold specks, which is just It's so
Yeah.
beautiful.
So that potential has always been there, and
Always been there.
just stepping into that whole transformative process. And I
Yeah.
I think that God, creator, the great mystery, really gave us a big gift with
Yeah.
that whole example right in front
Oh,
of us of
it
who we
is.
are and what we can become.
Well, and that's what's so amazing to me is that like so many people are drawn to butterflies. You know, they say that loved ones that have passed on visit us. I had my own story with my dad. You know, that there's so much to them, and yet there's so much to learn. And that was my hope with the book was like help people to see for themselves, like in each piece of your own life, there's a living, breathing example of the butterfly and like your potential. We all have that same potential. And
Yes, and the whole trusting the process thing is
Mhm.
so interesting because so much of our lives is trying to control that, trying to control what what am I being willful, what am I going to do, what am I here to do, and it's up to me.
Right.
And there were so many points in your own personal story where you
Mhm.
had to just like trust the process,
Right.
uh, trust that the divine has you here.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't know if you have any stories you'd like to
Yeah.
share about that trust.
Feels like my whole I mean, right where I am right now. I
Yeah.
mean, I what I know to be true, and I've always known there was um Oprah and Janine Roth did a workshop together and I was at it. And I remember like sitting in the seat, just like wishing they would see that there was something in me, right? That I could, want to share. I'm just having this like knowing that I was supposed to be sharing my messages and let it go, didn't do anything with it. And then back in 2014, I go to a township officials conference in Springfield, Illinois, and there's a guy sitting at a table and he's got books, right? And I go up to him, I'm like, what's your shtick, right? And he says, I'm a professional speaker. He said, I'm doing a workshop this year, but next year I'm intending on being the keynote speaker. And I'm like, wait, so you like get paid to talk? And he was like, yeah. I was like, would you mind sharing with me how you did that? And he goes and picks up a chair, brings it over and sits it down and says, I'll share all of it with you. Right. 45 minutes. He shared his whole journey. And he said, if you really want to get into professional speaking, you need to join the Wisconsin chapter of the National Speakers Association. He
Uh-huh.
said, I know there's one in Illinois. He was like, but the Wisconsin chapter has an academy and they will help you get there. Well, it was a 2-year program. It took me 3 years to graduate. I ended up becoming the president, and Matt Booth was the guy. He had been president. He lives in Iowa, but he came to Wisconsin for it. And I ended up being president of the organization, got an incredible award. I mean, all kinds of stuff, but I still like struggle horribly with like letting go of my notes and just trusting myself and being there. And so that's like my battle right now. I'm working with I have an accountability partner. I joined a program. I mean, all kinds of stuff to just it never ends. It's like the next layer of stretching ourselves to get to like, and I was so excited when I finished my book. I was like, okay, I'm 60. My book's done. I can just rest on my laurels. I can just relax and I'll be doggone. It's like, no, you can't because now, right now, I need you to do this part. And I'm like, it's exhausting, but it's also I just have this like when I slide into home, right? The last day I take a breath in this body, I want to know that I used me completely up, right? I have this like picture of like we get this trunk of gifts and talents and things when we come to this earth and when I go back and we open that trunk, I want that baby to be empty. I want it to be completely empty. Right? And so, but it means I have to keep stretching myself, and stretching myself is exhausting. I'm
Well,
so
there
tired of the discomfort.
there is a time for rest. Don't forget
And
that.
I'm talking about
Yes.
internal stretching of
Yeah.
like
Right, right.
going into the uncomfortable, right? To become the person that we know that we were born to be.
Right, right. I completely get that. And Sherry, I can't see you really relaxing out of that. You're gonna keep going, girl. I know that
Yep.
about you.
Yep. Oh
You're
yeah.
gonna
Oh
keep
yeah.
going.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the stories that you've shared about releasing trust to the divine. I know your story of being pregnant with your son
Mm.
and I doing the whole snowplow thing. I mean, you see, it's like you're listening to the voice of spirit,
Mhm.
and I love that about you. You listen to the voice of spirit, and then you step into this kind of abyss of the unknown, but it's with a little nudge and a touch and a hug from spirit, you
Right.
know that the right step is this. Like you heard
Yeah.
this, I'm going to take this step, even though it might be the hardest step, like with your
Right.
son or the different jobs you took.
Yeah. Right. Or skydiving or walking across Spain or hiking the
Yeah,
Grand Canyon in one day or going to
yeah,
Mexico when my entire staff is telling me you can't go. It's too dangerous. I'm
yeah.
like,
Right,
you know
right,
what?
right.
God put it
Yeah,
on my heart. I know that he'll have me, right? If I'm supposed to do it. And it was magic.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it
I'm
is.
interested in your Camino experience, but
Yeah.
I kind of want to I kind of want to pivot a little bit to talking about you. You've always, if I remember correctly, you always wanted to work as a public servant, but also doing social work.
Hmm.
And I think your dad was like, "That doesn't happen," or something.
Right. Yeah.
And then you found that.
Yeah.
And
I didn't find
so
that. I didn't find
okay,
it. It found me.
it
It
found you. Okay.
literally found me. There was no way. And it was led by, so I was driving a snowplow at IDOT, right? And I was looking for a way that I could volunteer because I love being of service. Service is my love language.
You're definitely an Enneagram 2.
Yes, yes, I am. I am unbelievable helper. And so every place that I called, they said that they only worked with civic groups. And I'm like, what's a civic group? And I was also a ranger at the park district. I was the first girl to do that too, which was hysterical. But it got my son like free programs there. It was perfect. I know I could have like done something else, but yeah. Anyway, that's another story. So my boss says, well, Kiwanis is a civic group. I'm like, yeah, what do you guys do? And he told me all the amazing things they did in the community. And I'm like, can I join? And I know that laugh now. I did not know that laugh then. Because
Uh-huh.
he takes me to my first meeting, and one of the guys gets up and says, "You need to go home and take care of your kids. No, you have no business being here." Third meeting, 5 guys quit and started the Zion Benton Men's Club. They said I ruined their club, but having the courage to do that. Well, and my training came from working at IDOT, right? Driving a snowplow, 40 guys that didn't want me there. And so learning how to work with them over time. And then so I go to the Qantas meeting and the first speaker was Truman Hudson, my predecessor. And I had been like praying, God, show me what you want me to do. I know you don't want me to be driving a snowplow the rest of my life. I know that. And he talked about how they delivered Meals on Wheels at the township. And I'd been delivering Meals on Wheels with my son for years. They had a summer work program for youth, and I was the youth group director at the Methodist church in town for a bunch of years. And they had a substance abuse treatment program. And I'd been in recovery for 16 years at that point. And I went home like sobbing to my husband. I'm like, God told me what I'm supposed to do, and you're not going to freaking believe it. I have to run for office, right? My dad was in politics. It was why I drank. I got into recovery from alcoholism when I was 21 years old, and I've been sober 39 years now. And
Wow.
but coming home and going, okay, like I think that's where I'm supposed to be, but I got to take this like, those rickety bridges with the chain link fence that looks like they
Yep.
go through a gorge. I felt like I had to go through this like horrific space in order to get there, right? And
Yeah,
oh,
yeah.
I was so
Election
mad.
and yeah,
I was
campaigning. Yeah.
so mad at God, right? I
Yeah.
mean, going
Right.
door to door,
Thanks.
I had people slamming their doors in my face. I had one guy spit at me. How dare I run against Truman? And so we get to election night, and I lost by 6 votes. 6 votes. I was so mad at God. We didn't talk for like 4 we communicated, right? And with me yelling at him the whole time, but we didn't talk. And finally, I just gave up on it. I was like, I will never do that again. Well, in the next 4 years, that's when I got divorced. And my husband, I was married to a Zion police officer. He was kind of a heavy badge cop. It's a good thing he's retired. Um, and so we're divorced now. And it came up again. And God gets to me through my sleep, right? I just like haunts me. And I was so frustrated. I'm like, you know what? Fine. I'll do it. I'll do it one more time. But I had already like lined up some funders to do open. There used to be a place called Curves for Women. It was a
Hmm,
workout
hmm.
center. And I was looking at opening up one of those franchises. I was like, all right, I'll run for this one more time. But God, I have a backup plan this time. I'm like, telling God,
I
just
trust you, but maybe not.
it was so funny, and I ended up winning by a landslide. I mean, by a lot of votes. And what I did the second time, I went to a restaurant and I saw a stack of his brochures, and so I took most of them and I went door to door and I just gave each person, "We're the only two that are running. I want you to make an educated decision, and I hope that your decision is to vote for me." And then people that had his sign in their yard, I actually like tracked down their phone numbers and called them and just introduced myself to them and said, look, I admire and respect my opponent. I just have this passion for making Zion better, and I hope you'll give me an opportunity. And it worked, and I won, and yeah, 24 years later almost, I'm still in the position.
Wow.
I'm up for reelection now, and this is the first time in I don't know how long that I don't even have an opponent.
Oh,
And
wow.
so I actually get to just stay focused because I am on this quest to transform my community like nobody's business. And the way that things are manifesting, it's magical. Just keep an eye on Zion, Illinois to see like what happens.
Yeah,
Uh,
I want
with-
to talk some more about this because people who listen to me know that I am no friend of big government.
Mhm,
I would love to see us very decentralized. And what I love about what you're sharing is you are local government right
mhm,
there where the people are. You can
mhm,
face a person, and you actually do face a
mhm,
person and know who they are and get to know them as people
mhm,
as you provide them a service. And
mhm.
there's so much wonderfulness in all of that, where
Yeah.
that's how government works for people, I
Mhm,
think, mostly at this local level. That's
mhm,
just my opinion. But we don't have to debate that. I'm really interested in hearing more about how you take your spirituality into this
mhm,
government position and into this transformation of Zion, Illinois
mhm.
that you have as a vision.
Isn't that so fun? Because like the only threat that I have is just don't elect me again. Right. I mean, like and once you elect me, I get 4 years to see what I can do, really what God can do through me to make an impact. And so there's like no threat over my head for like, talking about God or praying or doing any of those things. It's like he's my boss. I don't know what to tell you. Right? And it's so funny because some people think that the mayor's my boss, and he makes jokes about that sometimes. We're both elected the same way, right?
Right.
Yeah, and so I guess I never I don't know how to just not be real, right? I just be myself, and if people are, turned off by that, that's okay. You're going to be turned off by somebody. But having the opportunity, and I've always kind of felt like my position, so I oversee social services. So we help people in crisis. And I feel like I've always been in ministry, right? It's a
Yeah.
huge ministry with people. And I have an incredible team that works miracles. And when they have something that they can't handle, it falls on my lap, right? And and I'm amazed at how just hearing how people first and foremost are feeling and validating their feelings, and then them knowing that I'm listening to them. Most of the time, that's how people are looking for. They
Yeah.
just want somebody that can hear them. And we're really fortunate in our city of Zion, Illinois, that our mayor, our city administrator, our police chief, and our fire chief are all graduates of our high school. And our
Oh,
mayor, if anybody follows basketball, is Billy McKinney, and he's I mean really notorious. Northwestern just retired his number, and we were and he was it was the first number to ever be retired at Northwestern. So like he's a really big deal, but the heart in our community is just so powerful. But I think the thing that like really throws me off is like we've got, school board members, park board members, library board members that all run for local office. And what's weird is like is my neighbors, right? We're just neighbors. We live next to each other. And then I say, all right, I'm willing to serve on the school board, right? And see if I can help make it better. So you run and you win. And the next day, now you're part of them. And it's this us against them thing. And it's like,
yeah.
no,
Right.
I don't know how to knock those walls down, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I
Yeah.
really don't because we do this across the board. And it's like, no, I'm your neighbor.
Right.
That was willing to do this position. And it's such an interesting dichotomy that we have.
It really is. This us versus them thing.
Yeah.
It's like we're programmed to do this because we're programmed to see ourselves as separate. And
Mhm,
and
mhm.
when you look out in the world and you see how nutty it is, it all comes back down to this us versus them thing a
Yep.
lot.
Yep.
Not maybe not
Yep.
everything, but maybe everything. That there's
Yeah.
an other out there that
Mhm.
I need to oppose in some way. And
Yeah.
in my life, I have somebody who's approached me to be a part of her organization, and she talks about it as being all unifying and and it's like, okay, but you look at the language of her what she promotes on her website is all us versus them and all
100%.
opponents and all, and it's like, you're divisive.
Yeah.
And people just can't see it because what they
Yeah.
see is that my group isn't divisive. We're
Yeah.
just the right group.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's not us. It's them. Right. It's
No, it's not us. If we are all one, but they are not.
yeah. 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 Well, and my philosophy around everything that's gone on is I picture like us being so the stereotypical married couple, right? You've got the dad that goes out and works and pays the bills, and there's consequences, and right, we're going to stick with a budget. He's the Republican, right? And then you've got the mom
Yeah.
that I know Johnny screwed up, and I know that you said he can't have dinner, but I'm sneaking him food because he's hungry, and I'm going to go and use the charge card to get him a pair of jeans because I don't want him to get made fun of, right? And at the dinner table, mom and dad figure it out, and they raise amazing kids together, right?
Right, right.
Once they get divorced, all bets are off, and they will
Uh,
destroy their kids in the process for the sake, quote unquote, of their kids. And
yeah.
we're just a divorced country, right? And
Yeah.
we've got to get
Yeah.
some therapists in there
Right.
to learn how to work together for the sake of our kids.
And
And
come to the dinner table and
ex-
come
ex-
and talk about what we
what?
have in common, our
Yep.
hearts.
Yep.
Like you talked about
Yep.
your opponent's wife. You
Yep.
have the same heart.
Have the
We
same.
pretty much all have the same heart,
Yeah.
unless we're on the spectrum of nutcases,
Right.
But for for the most case, for the most part, most of us, have the same heart.
Yeah.
And that's where we meet. And that's what I'm trying to talk to this person who wants me to be a part of her group. It's like, no, we create something where we're talking about our heart and we're not talking
Mm,
about my way's right and your way's wrong. We're
right.
not opposing
Yes.
something.
Yeah.
And we can do that with lots of different subjects that we would all
Yeah.
come
I
together
love it.
on.
Well, and
And
that's what's fun about that is that so I'm working on a reimagine project. So I got somebody
okay.
from each of the taxing bodies to meet just to like reimagine our community. What could it look like if we were and I had Lego pieces. So I got a set that you can make 3 different houses, right? And I threw everybody a bag of the pieces. Like right now, like all we've got is pieces and everybody's doing their best, right? And a couple of organizations actually even have a picture of what they want. I was like, but what would it be like if we all worked together and had one picture together? And I pulled out the Lego set of the house from the movie Up.
Oh
Right?
yeah, yeah.
And like, and so like, what if we could create this together? Right? But we're so busy like whack-a-moling all the problems that we can't
Yeah.
even think about what do we want. And so
Yeah.
just like trying to shift the brain waves right into what do we want and how do we get it, right? And
Yeah.
so I'm so excited for that because I know once we do, talk about manifesting, it will come
Yeah.
together so quickly.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
There's no limits. There's no limits. And on a micro scale
No
and
limits.
on a macro scale. And
Yeah.
it is certainly my hope and prayer that humanity is on the brink of this, that maybe we've
Yeah.
created this divorce situation and we're ruining our kids so much and we wake up and go, "Oh my gosh, look what we're doing to our baby." And that we go, "We've got to change. We've
We've
got to
got
come back
to-
together."
yeah.
And I'm thinking that we're going to be so sick of these divisions at some point and go, you know
Ugh,
what? This just is, it sucks for everybody.
yeah. From your lips
Yeah.
to God's ear. Right.
Yeah. Hey, God.
Although we do that, right? And it cracks me up how much we like blame God for things that are going on. It's like these are all consequences of free will.
Oh, yeah. There's no blame game there. We're doing it. Everything we see out there, we've
Everything we see
done.
out there is
Yeah.
all on us.
Yeah.
I think that's what I love the most about my position is I call it non-denominational. It's nonpartisan.
Yeah.
And so I don't have to play their game. And when I tell people I'm not red or blue, I'm purple,
I
right?
love that.
I
Yeah.
was a single mom, so I had to be able to pay the bills and I had to be able to take care of my kids, right? And so what does it look like for us to like come into the middle and all be purple together? Right. So
I'm so
yeah,
behind you on
yeah.
that. And
Oh,
that will be your next book.
no, please, no more books. So I did my first book, Seeds of Joy. I did. This was literally during that election that I talked about, just a way for me to like not lose my mind. I mean, because I was getting so sucked into it. And my mentor, she was like, "What do you have to write a book on?" I was like, "I don't even a book." And she was like, "Yeah, we got it. We got to detract you." And so I was in the process of I always wanted the zinnia to be the Zion flower. In Zen culture, they represent joy. And I read somewhere that if you plant flowers Flowers resonate at the same energetic level as angels do, right? I'm like,
Oh,
you mean to tell me that like
did
I
we
can
know
just
that?
get people to plant these seeds and it will raise the energetic level for us to be able to then like get somewhere together? And so it took after I wrote this book, I had a mayor and I brought it to him and he said that he was willing to vote to make the zinnia design flowers so long as I committed to 10 years. I'm like, there is no way I can't commit to anything for 10 years. He's like, then we're not doing it. I'm like, you're a jerk. And he was like, oh. And so this year will be year number 6. And we have a huge Zinnia and Monarch Festival, the NB's too, the third weekend in August. And it has gone from 50 people, including the volunteers, to over 2,000 people. We have a huge monarch butterfly release. I mean, it's
Wow.
so what's really cool is up until a couple of years ago, up in Appleton, Wisconsin, they've had an Appleton Joy Conference, and it's one day with amazing speakers. And I would drive up there just to get this joy infusion. Well, zinnias represent joy in Zen culture. So we need that conference in Zion, Illinois. And so Appleton stopped doing theirs. So I reached out to Karen Dickrow, who was in charge of it. She had retired. And I was like, will you please mentor me? She was like, you're going to do it? I'm like, yeah, it's time. And so I just started meeting with executive directors from social service agencies across our county. 27 organizations are on the planning committee for this event.
Oh
We
my
have
gosh.
got we have got 3 insanely amazing speakers. It's always going to be the last Saturday in January at Zion Benton Township High School. It's called the Lake County Joy Summit, and we are going to have a huge wellness expo and the 3 speakers, and it's just this joy infusion that my prayer is that like everybody will come to this as like this girls weekend get together, not girls too, it's for everybody, but I
Yeah.
picture in my head, right? Just to like help, because if we can infuse people with that feeling of joy,
On the
it's
last
way
Saturday
easier to
of
reimagine.
January.
Yep, always. So for eternity, I hope the last Saturday in January, because
That's probably the time when people are least joyful. So that's a
well,
great
that's
time.
why, right?
Yeah.
They need a
Yeah.
joy infusion, especially
Yeah.
people that struggle with the
The
seasonal affect
depression is it.
disorder.
Right. Right.
So yeah, and we actually the Appleton, they always had it in February, and so we were planning February, and one of the committee members reached out to me and she said, "So can I just tell you how sad I am that we're doing this in February?" And I said, "Why?" And she said, "Because it's African American Heritage Month." And I know your event isn't our event isn't going to conflict with anything, but people only have so much bandwidth.
Uh-huh.
And everybody will want to go to this event, which means that they're probably not going to support another event, right?
Okay.
And so I made the command decision that we couldn't have it in February. We
Okay.
couldn't. So I reached
Yeah.
out to everybody. I said, "Are we going to do it the last Saturday in January or the first Saturday in March?" And they chose January. And what was fun about that was then I went to the high school just to book it, and they said if we would have wanted to have it in February, there would have been no way.
Okay. So it
So
was perfectly
right, but,
placed.
but
Yeah.
but it was like I feel like we get these like lessons, that these like tests. We get
Yeah.
tests all along the way. Are you going to do the right thing for the right thing's sake? And if you do, there's rewards, right? And I felt like that was one of those. It was like we made the decision to trust if it impacts one person, it impacts other people. Right. And so, yeah, so it was really cool that like I got to see the reward that quickly of like, yeah, guess what? You win. Ding, ding, ding.
Yeah. That's
So, but
great.
yeah, I'm so excited about this event. It's, oh my gosh.
Well, and before we go any further, because I want to talk about something else, but tell people where Zion, Illinois is, because they
Mm.
need to know that.
So it's easy. The Wisconsin border and Lake Michigan. So if you go any further north, you go into Wisconsin. If you go any further east, you go into the water.
There
So
you
we've
go.
got Winthrop Harbor. Winthrop Harbor is the buffer between us. But if you've heard of Kenosha, Wisconsin, we're
Yeah.
just south of
Just
Kenosha.
south of
So
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
we got about
Yeah.
just under 25,000 people. Our community is a third Latino, a third African American, a third white.
I love it.
We've got significant poverty. We used to have 60% rental and 40% homeowner, which was really hard, right? In a lot of ways. And so that's actually flipped
Mm.
during COVID because a lot of landlords sold off to homeowners. So we've a lot of struggles, but there are also a lot of opportunities, right? And it's my
Yeah.
biggest prayer. Like, if anybody has the answer to this, how do you build want to muscle? Like that want to muscle to make people want to. And because there's, the caterpillar mode of just like, I'm just comfortable where I am. I don't want anything more. It's like, how do we build that muscle to make people want to want. And so that's my
Yeah.
that's my quest.
Yeah. And
So
it starts with
yeah,
shedding the layers.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, it starts with wanting to shed the layers, right? You have
Right.
to even want to do that, right? So it's like,
Right, yeah, right,
yeah,
exactly,
I
yeah,
don't
and
know,
and
I don't know
there's
what
so
it
many
is, but
things that just keep us in a state of lethargy,
yeah,
just it's
that's exactly
this
right.
is life, life kinda
Yep.
sucks, but it's life, I'm alive, I'm gonna eat, I'm gonna drink, I'm gonna watch TV, get up, go to work, and repeat, and
Yeah.
I get it, that
Yeah.
what is it that fire what is it that fire that's in your belly and in
Hmm.
your heart, how that's in everyone's belly and heart, but it's kind of like what is that that's keeping it
Yeah.
kind of down or keeping it small?
Yeah. Yeah. All I can do is like, so it was really fun. With this Reimagine project. So I invited somebody to come to it that I didn't really know. And she was on another board and she calls me a couple days later and she says, so I need to apologize to you. I was like, for what? And she was like, because I've never liked you, but I realized I never knew you. I was like, really? And she was like, I want to work with you. What can we work on? And I was like, well, what else do you have going on? And she says, well, my sister, her house is falling apart. And I'm like, is she a senior? And she says, yeah. And I was like, you know what? I have been wanting to reignite an organization called Rebuilding Together in our community for years, but I need a champion. Will you be that champion? She was like, yes, I will be that champion. We had the meeting yesterday. We pulled it together. We're going to try and do five seniors houses at the end of April. I mean, it's just like, how do we like find like what's that spot in them that they want, that makes them want
Right.
to show up. So
What is it that ignites the spark in them that says,
yeah,
"Yes, I'm gonna go for
yeah,
that." Yeah, I say
right.
yes.
And then they impact other people by bringing other people in, right?
Yeah.
So I
But
don't
it
know.
becomes infectious. I mean, even like
Yeah,
your book, your story,
yeah,
everything that you're sharing now, it's infectious. I mean, you're
mm,
inspiring people now just by telling your story because I mean, it kind of starts with you're pregnant and not married and kind of in a messy relationship. That's kind of
horrible.
how it starts. Like you're not in a good place and
Was
and
not.
a lot of people are in that place
Yeah,
everywhere.
yeah,
And look what you've built over the time from that beginning to what you're doing now to helping people just
mm,
like yourself back then.
isn't that
And
so
you're
crazy?
you're open to God, you're open to spirit, you're trusting the universe. You
Mm,
have this I want and now you're telling your story. And I think there's so much power in telling our stories. And so
mhm.
I know that this story that you're telling today will be part of igniting that I want in
Mm.
somebody.
Ugh, that is the prayer. That is so the prayer. Because
Yeah.
I get it's comfortable being the caterpillar, but flying is
Yeah.
insanely crazy amazing. It's just like when you never know. I mean, every
Yeah.
day, I mean, something happened. It's like, oh, did you see that? Did you see how that happened? And I'm constantly like in a state of shock. And I don't know. I'm like, I'm sorry, because I feel like I'm even letting God down there. Because it's like, why are you in shock? Why can't you just be like, oh yeah, there you are again?
Yeah, right. This is normal. Miracles are normal.
Right, I'm like, "But we're on Earth, right? It's really hard to see heaven on Earth, right?" And so,
Right.
yeah, to see it every
Yeah.
day in the craziest, simplest ways is just
Yeah.
amazing.
Okay, so we're reaching close to our hour. I want to
Yep.
give you the last word, but right before I give you the last word, can you concisely share about your Santiago,
Ugh,
your what is it, the Camino? Because
yep, the
that's on
Camino
my
de
bucket
Santiago.
list. I want to do
Yes.
it. I'll probably
Yeah,
do it alone,
yeah,
and
strongly
I know it's a
recommended.
whole chapter and it's a
Yeah.
lot. But
No,
can
it's
you kind of?
simple. Yeah.
Okay, all right.
It is simple. And so I had somebody reach out to me to coach me. She saw the movie The Way and
That
she
was
watched it
Katie.
4 Yeah, 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 Katie O'Meara. Oh,
I
yes,
did a
right.
podcast with Katie. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
And but I'm in full-time elected office. I can't just take off for 35, 40 days. And twice in a row, somebody sent me a podcast about pastors and how every 7 years it's strongly recommended they take a sabbatical. And I had been in full-time elected office for 21 years. And I was like, oh my gosh, right? And so it was planted on my heart. I knew there was no way I could do it, but one day in a staff meeting, I just said it out loud to my staff. I was like, I keep getting this crazy thought. And they were like, okay, here's the deal. You have always had our back for everything. Let us put together a plan. And I'm like, okay, but there's no way. And so they did. And I brought it to my board, and every one of my board members, including one of my trustees that just run against me. And she was the biggest advocate. Every one of them said, this will be good for you, your team, the community. Go do it. And crazy, right? And so the Monday before I left, because I had to put it out to the community, and every community has Facebook snipers where they just sit
Uh,
there waiting to take people down. I knew, right? I knew they were going to just pummel me for this. And so I did a video and I shared that I was going to do it. And then I ducked, right? I flipped the computer. I didn't look at it.
Take
And
cover.
the night before I was ready to leave, I decided I was going to have the courage to go and read it. 370 messages, not one negative, not one.
Wow.
I was like, I was blown away. And so I go, and you'd have to read the book because it was such an emotional
Yeah.
roller
I've got
coaster.
to
But
do it.
having
Yeah.
the courage to just like go, and just in closing, so on my wrist it says Proverbs, it's the yellow arrow, because in the Camino you follow the yellow arrows, and it says Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord your God with all your heart,
All
and
your
lean not
heart.
on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will guide your path. So I'm walking into Lyon's vein. My two biggest fears are big cities and not being able to communicate of everything. And I'm walking and I'm like the calm. I mean, I was just so calm and so content. I'm like, what the heck is going on with me? And I thought about the scripture and I was like, trust in the yellow arrow with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge the yellow arrow and it will guide your path. Right. I didn't need a GPS. I didn't need a map. I just followed these yellow arrows. And I was like, the internal yellow arrow, the
Mhm.
internal yellow arrow. That's what it is. And if I can just trust my internal yellow arrow, it will never steer me wrong. Right.
I
And
love
so,
that.
right, looking from the beginning, the butterflies and skydiving and all the crazy, crazy, stupid shit that I have done. Right.
Right, right.
But it was all inspired action from spirit and the internal yellow arrow guiding me. And it has been magical. So, yeah.
I gotta do it. It's on
Yeah.
my list.
You
I gotta
do.
my
I would
biggest
love to.
fear is finding food because I'm vegan. I'm
Yeah.
like, am I gonna be able to eat? That's my biggest fear about doing the Camino.
Can you eat eggs?
No, I won't eat
So,
eggs.
yeah.
I won't eat any animal, anything that exploits an animal. So
Gotcha.
I'll
Yeah.
figure it out. That's
Yeah,
another
you will.
topic.
Well, yeah, right. And there's all kinds of Facebook groups and stuff where you can ask
Yeah,
and people will
I'll
help
find
you to
some
know how to
vegan
do it.
Camino people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
Well,
Cheri. So, what are your last words? What's your last imparting message to my audience?
just my prayer is that like you will just remember that you have wings. And no matter how much of a caterpillar you see in the mirror, right? It's an illusion. It's just an illusion. We all have wings so we can fly. And it really takes just being willing to be uncomfortable, releasing the layers, right? I mean, I truly think that forgiveness is the number one way, right? Who do we need to forgive and releasing that? Because when you do, I mean, so my one of my latest ones, I dated a guy when my daughter was in high school and it went bad. And at one point he texted me and said, I hate that you hate me. And I said, too bad. I hate you. Right.
Uh-huh.
And so I did a process where you write down what were the 7 gifts and what were the 7 lessons and what was the gift. Well, the ultimate gift of that, my daughter is now married to a son and I have 2 adorable grandsons, right, from that.
Mm.
So like, you know, I mean, it's just crazy. You never know. Just forgive and watch the gifts that come from being willing to forgive. It's the most incredible manure that grows flowers that you'll ever meet. So,
Oh, I love that. That's
yeah.
a great piece of
Yeah.
advice and
It's so
inspiration.
powerful. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for allowing me to spend this time with you. I miss you.
I miss you
I just
too.
think so much of you.
This is so fun, and I'm trying to remember what I said. You had my a quote in your introduction.
Yes,
You
I did.
underlined it. Yeah, and I'm like,
Yes.
"Did I say that?" You know,
Yes, you did. I had it in my notes in my journal and I had it
yeah,
in such big, big letters. Yep. The
yeah.
one in your book is underlined.
It is underlined, but I can't
Yep.
find it now. Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
There it is. The
Yep.
biggest contribution you can
Contribution.
make is to transform yourself.
And yeah,
Yeah.
that was so powerful to me. It was like it gave me permission. It's what it did. Was you stating that it was like because we're supposed to be about everybody else, right? And that's not what it is. We're not supposed to be about everybody else. We are the one person that we were put on this earth to take care of. And it's
Yes.
our job to take care of ourselves, right? So
Yes, and
it's so
we're
good.
the ones we can do something about.
Right, right.
Right.
Yes. And we can
So if
be a
we
model for other people.
Yeah, we want consciousness raised. It all starts here. That's
Yeah.
the one consciousness I can raise. I cannot raise yours. I can raise mine. Out of raising mine, maybe somebody will be impacted, maybe they won't,
Right.
but that's the one thing I can do is to
Yeah.
transform myself. So,
Mm.
yeah, thank
Amen.
you for
Thank
that.
you. Thank you. Thank you. It's so good.
Yeah,
Really
Cheri,
grateful.
thanks for coming on.
Yes.
Love
You
your
betcha.
book, and
Thank
I
you.
appreciate I know my listeners got something amazing out of this, and there's so much more. So
Mm.
thank you, everyone, and I now close the Spiritual Forum.
Hey, thank you.